Hello, my petals, and welcome back to another episode of the Roze Garden. I am your host, Tabula Rosa, aka La Rosa Negra, or Black Rose if you're nasty. And today's episode is about black fatherhood, and especially in my case, dysfunctional fatherhood. It's called Spore to the Wind. Today, I'm joined by two guests. One, a four-legged friend who's really ambitious and quite vocal at times, so you'll have to bear with me if you happen to hear him. He is my friend's dog that I'm sitting for the moment. And I have with me Mama Rose, my dear mother, to help add a different portion of this conversation. Would you like to say anything? Introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone.
That's my mom. Teehee. Okay, so let's actually get into the conversation. For a start, I want to start this conversation with we appreciate all black fathers out there for being present in lives, because as much as, again, we may have these dysfunctional relationships and healthy relationships for those who have them, we do appreciate you doing what you can. And I'm going to take the squeaky toy because that is a lot. We appreciate you doing what you can, and we all strive for better and bettering as parents, but well, I say we as though I have children, but you know what I mean. There's always that move to be a better parent with each move and motive that you make. And I'm just taking a minute to acknowledge that. Thank you for existing. I would like to start with asking Mama Rose, just for this record and for the sake of conversation, how would you describe your relationship with your father?
Well, my relationship with my father growing up was absent. I spoke with him sparingly. I was able to spend some time with him when I turned 16. And then after that, not again until my adult life. So I grew to know my father after I was grown.
Okay. For me, I'm sure you already know this. I mean, my father was actively in my life my entire life, except as of late. But to say he was present would be a misnomer on my end. It was a little bit like he was there, but more as for my gamers out there who understand this reference, he was more of an NPC in this RPG game, just sort of there with the house decorations. Hey, stop it. He was sort of along for the story, but not necessarily. I wouldn't say he wasn't pivotal, because clearly it had an effect on me, but it wasn't so much so that he was very hands-on and that, how do I phrase this properly? It's always hard to find the right words to figure out how to describe this relationship. A little help considering you had an eyewitness account to all of this. How would you go about describing my relationship with my father?
Um, Different.
It's kind of where I'm at too.
Well, because there was an expectation from a certain standard of what he felt like you should do and be, and you didn't do those things because you weren't that child.
Right. He was very
You were
outdoorsy.
he wanted you to be that typical sports kid or the one that go outside to play, and you were the grab my book, go sit sit down, enjoy what I'm reading, research things, check things out, get more information about stuff. Um, can we go to the library? Can I get some more books on this? Can I learn a little bit more about that? And where he enjoyed your
Intelligence and my gifts.
yeah, and your your all of the interest in gaining more knowledge and that just that hunger for more knowledge, it irritated him at the same time because um, the interactive play and all of that he looked for wasn't an interest to you.
It was also interesting navigating his level of maturity too. I will say that because there were certain aspects growing up of my childhood where I, and in reflection, I say this, I needed a father, and instead I had more of someone who was trying to be a child again. And so it would be that weird dynamic of we're interacting as though we're peers, but then something happens or it gets to a point of escalation, and it's like, but we're not peers.
Right.
And that got very confusing, and at a certain point it became tiresome because it's like, well, if we're not peers, why do we keep acting as so? And I don't like the getting in trouble for engaging in this semi-toxic relationship that we keep perpetuating. um I will say one of the best things I have inherited from my father is, and this is not to say that you didn't cultivate this as well, but it's something that he was very adamant about: pro blackness. Um, to his core, this man was all things Negro, and I think if I don't value anything else to the day I leave this planet, I will definitely sing his praises of that because oh, I remember like the back of my hand, the day he got me that Black History book, and it was so tacky. I hated it so much, but also it was so informative. So I had to my like, I hate this book, but like also shout out to you because I found out about a bunch of inventions and stuff pertaining to like refrigerators and freezers and stoplights. And I'm not going to go down the full list of inventions. I definitely encourage people to go and research all the different ways that our black brilliance was bamboozled over the years. But are there any qualities that you can think of in my grandfather that you valued?
Um, well, your grandfather is your grandfather. Um,
I know what that means.
he
They don't.
is well, you know what? Your grandfather was one of those. He's that man that is. He's like a lot of men in some aspects where um, he cooks, he cleans, he washes, he irons, he sews. Um, well, no, then that's not a lot of men, but there are some men who does the cooking and the cleaning and the washing and ironing, but sewing and different things like that. But then my dad is also um, in the generation that he came up in, um, working sun up to sundown, um, hands on with everything, continue to work because even at this point in time in his life, he's 81 years old and he still gets up at the crack of dawn, if not before, and he's working, doing something.
Fixing a car, cutting the grass, something he can't sit
Right.
still.
He's doing something. There's always an odd job to be done with this man. So he's always working. If he's not working, um, there's something going on, which definitely means that he's possibly sick if he's not working, because that's him. He's a workaholic. So if he's not working, then there's another problem. But
Would you say
he,
maybe the work ethic was something you value from him?
he well, yeah, his work ethic, because he definitely believes in work. Um, and I um, inherited that from him, because as you've seen through your years of life,
Growing up, my
um,
mother has had 12 different jobs. It was how I got such a brilliant relationship with my grandmother while she was on this planet. Because I
right,
spent time with my
because
grandmother because my mother was working.
mom has always worked.
Also, while we're on the topic of fatherhood, and it's a very personal subject, can we take a minute to just speak to the truth of the fact of like, and I don't know how this makes you feel, but it's a little awkward for me recalling that portion of my life because it definitely, I feel like it put a dampen on our damper, excuse me, on our relationship as father and child. I didn't actually know that this man was my father for a few years. I always thought of him as that man. And so there was this weird correlation growing up where it was my mom, and then my mom spends a lot of time with that man. And then eventually it was like, oh, this man is my father. And I stumbled into that situation because he got mad actually because or actually no excuse me something happened at school and he went to chastise me and I called him out. I'm like, you're not even my dad, because I was under the impression that I was being raised by a single parent. At that time I didn't know what a single parent was, but again, just for me it was always just you in my mind because of that both households split because we had that whole 91st thing, and just again not really having much of him around in my early years as far as I remembered, as far except for like visitation or small moments.
Well, he was there. Um, he just wasn't like actively there in a way that would have made you know a lot, because um, he had actually been there, actually from your infancy, doing different things. Um, Even in um, toddler years or what have you, he was there. But in terms of making like that impact where memories would make a difference, mm, you probably would remember a lot of things. There were different gifts that you got that I'm sure if I told you about them, you'd remember, that came from him. Like there was a race car set that had,
The snap track.
yeah, the one that had, yeah, the race car set that had all of the different signs and different things that you had to put on the tracks and
And see, it's
signals.
weird. I remember playing with this toy, but again, I don't remember him in this equation. All of my memories of that toy are me alone in my room on that
Right,
huge play
and that's what I'm
rug.
saying. There were different toys that came in. They were from him, but him and you and the interactive play with that, no, it was not there. But he would buy these toys. He would send them to make sure that you had them.
Right, but I wasn't even aware that they came from him. That's the whole thing. I'm just thinking because I
Right.
had a huge
Well,
toy
because
chest growing up.
I didn't bring that to your attention. It wasn't for me. It wasn't relevant to bring that point to your attention because why bring it to your attention that these toys were from him when you weren't going to see him? That meant I needed to do more explaining. So rather than even have this confusion, I just chose not to even bring that point. So I just didn't raise the issue. I left it and just let you enjoy the toys in themselves.
How would you, putting yourself not necessarily in my shoes, but flashing back to when you were in that stage of your life, how would you recall your relationship with your father at a younger age?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
How would you recall your relationship with my grandpa at your younger age?
My relationship with him was actually estranged because um, I was here in California and he was in Mississippi. There were no interactions, and um, I did not call. He didn't call me. Um, the only thing that I did know was that he was in Mississippi, and whatever information I got from um, my aunt, which is my mom's sister, not anyone from his side of the family. Um,
Time out. Can we talk about the fact that we didn't even really get a relationship with, or not even we, because I wouldn't say I have a relationship, but I didn't even find out about the other side of his family until after you had gone down there to visit. Um, again, my grandmother's sister, I referred to her as my auntie mama.
right,
It was sort of my name for her growing up. It's
right. And she was the only way that I got any information concerning my dad. And that was still far and few and tidbits, so I still didn't really get much information. So it wasn't until I was 16 that I saw my dad for the first time in 12 years from the time that we left. And we had gone back home to Mississippi to see the family. And actually, the trip was not to see him, the trip was to see my grandparents, which was my mom's parents. And that was actually due to the fact that her dad was sick. So we were taking the trip down there to visit her parents for that reason. And it just so happened that since we were down there, okay, we spent time with my dad. So got an opportunity to spend time with my dad, which that basically turned out to be um, us spending time with my dad during the time that we were there. He took us shopping to buy whatever we wanted, and he did just that, bought whatever we wanted. And after we spent that time, then we were brought back to my mom, and that was basically that. Um, we were still made to feel less than to a certain degree because um, as much as we got what we wanted, it was summer clothes. It was nothing that was going to be used once we got back home. So um, we were kind of treated like it was an irresponsible choice because we were there with him, and instead of him taking the parental role and getting us clothes that we could take home to have for school,
or something that you needed.
he allowed us to choose what we wanted. So we got short sets and different things that we couldn't do anything with except for over the summertime. So um, that was basically the way that we ended up dealing with the situation. But it made it basically, it just, I think it irritated my mom more than anything because um, when we came back with the clothes, it was like, and what are you going to do with this? That, that was the attitude about it. What are you going to do with this? Because you can't go anywhere with these clothes on except this is summer wear. School's going to be starting back soon, and he went and spent whatever he did, and you still don't have anything to wear to school. I mean, it just became a big mess, almost like we intentionally
Wasted time.
wasted time, wasted money, just a whole lot of stuff. So it was like, okay, maybe that was the wrong choice. So it basically, um, we were fussed at for the choice of clothes and shoes and everything else that we got while we were with him. We were fussed at for the time that we spent with him. We were fussed at because when she came in the house, um, the fact that we had represented what she had been teaching us the entire time that we had been away from him. So it looked like we basically were showing that she had not raised us to be
Sensible.
decent and honorable, sensible, clean, and anything else. So there was a lot that took place in that, and he said nothing. If we got up and didn't make up the bed, he didn't say anything. If we didn't wash a dish, he didn't say anything. If we didn't pick up a broom, a mop, a vacuum, he didn't say anything. And for her, it was like, you guys are representing me and you're showing him that I haven't taught you anything. And it was ridiculous.
So I'm
And
curious to know, do you feel like all of these, like, well, it first sounds like that whole ordeal became a matter of Granny's pride.
well, I think it was more of the need to say, we're away from, you've been away from him all of this time. And basically, what you're showing him is that I haven't done anything with you.
Okay. But
And so now I'm the laughing stock. And I'm like, my thing is, how, you're a child, so how do we show what you're doing by what we're doing? I mean, we're spending time with him, and it's basically the whole thing of, better.
that makes sense. Do you feel like that entire relationship and the dynamic between Granny and Papa sort of shaped how you parented and co-parented with my father?
Um, we all parent. I believe that we parent the way that we were parented, and then there are a lot of things that we take from our parenting, and then there are a lot of things that we dismiss from our parenting. So a lot of things that I have done in my parenting comes from the way that I was parented by my mom. Um, and then in dealing with your father, uh, some of the things that I do, I would say yes, came from the way that I saw my mom deal with being a single mom. Never did I want that as my life, and I still don't want that as my life. However, situations, circumstances sometimes deem that to be where it takes you. So, um, as much as I did not want that to be my life, I was told that because that was the comfort of my upbringing, that is why I am comfortable with my life being this way. And I'm just, I'm just reflecting on the fact that I don't feel comfortable single parenting, uh, co-parenting. I would rather have a two-parent home. However, it's very difficult to carry a two-parent home when uh, distance won't allow that to happen.
That makes sense. Um, to I guess switch it up a little bit. I didn't even think to ask you earlier because I was thinking of a moment or something that I gained from my father. What is maybe a moment of yours that, or not even a moment necessarily, but something that just comes to mind when you think of a positive either family interaction from my father or something that you feel was something that he did very well with us growing up?
Um, what I will say that he did very well with you guys is his interactive play, because he definitely believed in learning through play, and a lot of his educational moments came through play. So there was a lot of teachable moments that he had that were brought in with you guys through his need to play. And there was a lot of learning that you guys actually gained from him. As much as I think sometimes you guys were irritated with the play, there was a lot of learning that took place in his playing, because I recall him um, spelling while he played. Um, if you remember, with your siblings, he would sit with them and
I remember as a baby growing up, one of my favorite moments with Tank, that's my little brother. One of my favorite moments watching Tank while he was coming of age, because I want to say he had to have been maybe 2 or 3 at the time, and he was always bouncing him around on his legs, and he would be spelling or playing around with random things, and
right, and that's what I mean. He was always doing things like that, and how he would, um, from their chest down to their tummy, he would always tell them, "You just want to PLAY," and they were trying their hardest to always spell PLAY and pointing their own chest.
and then it got to a point where they got smart enough to point to his chest, and they
Right.
may not have had the letters together, but they had the sequence of how the phonetic sounds worked. And
Exactly. Exactly. And that's something that I actually can attribute to him, where he was strong in the education and the learning through play, and he was big with making sure that, um, because the play was in the child, if I can't get anything else going, I'll at least educate while we play. And so he played a lot, which was something that he enjoyed doing. And so he took those play moments and he would educate, and he did that a lot with that. And so with all of you, as much as it was um, moments of engagement and opportunities provided, he took that moment, and I give him that, because that's something that he'll do every time, all the time, and it's always going to be him where he's going to play. And that's with any child, not just his own, but every child that he gets an opportunity to play with, he's going to play, and his impact is always going to be some form of educational moment, so that that child knows that when you see this man again, you're going to remember that
You had fun, and
yeah, you had fun, but there was a learning something, because he's gonna help you remember who he is through whatever that educational thing was that he did with you.
that's true. I feel like this is a double edged sword, but it's something that I'm going to positively attribute to him. And it wasn't necessarily that he spent the money, but it was more, again, the dedication to at least trying to spend that money on something that, um, or not necessarily money, but just like the stuff that he was bringing, it was at least a part of trying to extend an olive branch almost. Um, he was very much, again, on the same guise of fun. He cultivated my love of video games and tech, and there was a lot of interaction that came there. And he would always either buy new games or buy consoles and stuff. And while we may not have been more communicative, um, there didn't need to be many words when it came with picking up a controller. And he and I could sit there, and while we may not have had the best of relationships, again, it was just being able to take a moment to escape everything that may have been
Right.
strange or wrong with us, and just take a pure moment where we can laugh. Or like when he would come in late at night after hanging out with his friends or whatever he was doing, if it was work or whatever reason he had been out, he would come home and he'd have some sort of food, and he'd wake me up out of my sleep, and it was
And
terrible.
God, did I hate that.
Believe me, it was terrible. I know. And in hindsight, I'm looking at myself in the mirror every day wishing, I'm like, maybe I should have rolled back to sleep. But it was something about those interactions, because while we were eating, he was making his jokes and I was laughing. And as much as I probably shouldn't have been up at that hour, it wasn't the best move, quote unquote, parentally, but it did something positive for our interaction.
Right. And trust me, it would get on my last nerve that he was waking you up like that, and I would tell him to leave you alone, and he would be like, "Leave us alone, okay?" He's going back to sleep, but just I want Cam D so we can share this moment, okay? Leave us alone. He's like, I'm going to get Cam D. Get Cam D gonna help me eat, okay?
Oh, it was so. He would always come in with the most random things. He'd have like a burrito
A,
or chili
a
cheese
big
fries.
old
That was his
burrito,
signature, the chili cheese
a big
fries.
old burrito from somewhere, or the chili cheese fries with
Pastrami
pickles
and
and
pickles.
pastrami. And Cam D needed to help him eat.
That's very, very much truthful. But mentioning that or referring to the double edged sword I was speaking of earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you're probably going to agree with me here. Do you feel like that financial like the not necessarily throwing money, but putting money towards a relationship instead of like actual intimate moments where maybe conversation or communication or even just I feel like it's harsh to say, but I can't find better words for it at the moment. Even parenting, just do you feel like that was sort of detrimental to you growing up?
Well, I honestly feel like, where my dad is concerned, he parented the way he was parented, and his need to just buy things as opposed to getting involved in parenting was not something that he was actively shown. The need to throw his arms around the children and have those loving moments was not something that he was privileged. So it was difficult for him to actually give those moments because he didn't understand those moments. And that's not to give a pass or validate anything that he did, excuse it, or anything else, because you can turn around moments that you didn't like to give what you would like. And that's some things that I know that I wanted in my life for my children. So the need to have a two-parent home was something that I strived for, and I definitely pushed to have a two-parent home for as long as I could hold that together. And basically, just reflecting on the fact that, like I said, at 16, um, after 12 years of not having an interaction with my dad and not having that two-parent home, and knowing that my dad was there, but physically he wasn't there, but financially is what I had to deal with. So my dad, when I actually had the opportunity to have an interaction with my dad, basically what I got was, what do you want? And his way of showing his love was what he could provide for me, not what he could show me in terms of his affection. And even right now, today, um, my dad has gotten better with being able to be affectionate, show love. However, I can get more out of him still today financially. If I call my dad right now and he's got any amount of money, I have just that.
You can, I'm true. I've actually seen this happen. You'll phone up him and be like, "Daddy, I need," and
And
I
I got,
promise you, every time every time I would listen to a conversation between you two and you needed some sort of financial assistance, the first thing that came to mind was just imagining Hillary from The Fresh Prince of Bel Air.
right,
It was very that. It wasn't necessary. Not to say that, because referring to Uncle Phil, he was a great dad and father figure around, but in that specific relationship dynamic, it was more the finances were part of the parent or the pivotal part of parenthood. I will say on my end, again, speaking to the finances, it worked when I was a kid because again, we was talking like we're talking about him having bought the video games and having that be a portion of our relationship because there was always a new game to try out. But at a certain point, as I got older, I wanted more from him, and I stopped playing video games less and less and started engaging in more conversations. Or I had less time for video games, so even if he did buy them, it didn't work out. And then at the point where we were like out the house and homeless, it wasn't being able to play video games because we were staying with other people. So,
right.
like, we didn't want to take up too much space at all. And it got to be where I necessarily wanted my father, and instead I had a piggy bank of sorts with who
Right.
a talking piggy bank at that who didn't necessarily have the best conversations or positive interactions with these conversations because God knows this man had a lot of opinions, but maybe sometimes just should have been quiet.
And
And
you know what? Fast forward to now. Um, there are a lot of things that whenever I give him the opportunity of conversation, he wished that he could have a conversation with you so that he can discuss a lot of things that he said and mistakes that he's made. And he's now more apologetic than I've ever known him to be, because you know for yourself that man would
He wasn't one for
eat
remorse or
bark.
apology.
He eat bark before he apologized.
Right, and then anytime growing up as well, was trying to figure out how to navigate the world, he would do something and it would go against something that he had taught me, and so I would question it, and he'd be all like, "What did I say? Do as I say, not as I do." And then on top of that, it would turn into a chastising,
Right.
which made it a point of whether it's right or wrong, I'm just not going to talk to you about it or talk to you at all, because if I bring up anything, who knows if you're going to start screaming.
Exactly. And then, of course, who are you to challenge anything that I say? As much as I've always encouraged you to speak up, advocate, and
Right, you definitely
feel
cultivated.
free to question anything that you felt uncomfortable with. Um, he, being from a different era, basically was like, no, that's not how that works. You don't question anything. It's what I say, and that is it. You don't ever question my parenting, my decision, or anything else. It's what I say, and that is. And so that would honestly create a whole other forum for he and I, because my thing was no, because as parents we aren't always correct, and a child can actively have an opportunity to ask questions, and we own the burden of answering those questions in a format that allows this child to understand what is going on, because it should not just be I'm the parent, do as I say, and that's the end of it. It's only one side to this communication, because you've now turned into a bully,
Do
but
you,
you're teaching your child that they shouldn't bully. However, all of your teachings are now wrong, because as much as you tell your child you can't be a bully,
you're
you're
doing the one
modeling
thing.
bully behaviors. So how do you say don't be a bully when everything you're modeling says be the best bully, because I'm showing you how to be a bully?
Right. I guess my next question would be, and I want to sort of wrap up this segment before I go into picking petals, because I have a couple of questions from different listeners actually. So I'll say this and let this be the last section that you and I cover on our lives per se.
Okay.
Or um, do you feel like inevitably with my father you may have sought out or ended up picking up the traits that you got from your father, or what was it like, how did that end up happening, because I noticed there's a lot of overlap in both of their parenting styles.
Um, Somewhat. I mean, I can't honestly say yes, but in hindsight, yeah, probably so. Because just reflecting on a lot of things, there are a lot of traits that are alike in both of them, that as I look back and think about and see and reminding, and then even just right now with us just having this dialogue and interviewing and what have you, um, I would have to say, yeah, I guess I did do that.
um Uh, I think on my end, because I'm not a parent yet, I want to say I have a fear of perpetuating that cycle almost, where it's I end up finding a partner that resembles my father, and or an amalgamation of your personality and my father, and how that dynamic played out, and then the fear that my children in the future are going to run into the same issues that I'm having, or that I will struggle to be there and present for my children in the way that they need to be, because my father and I didn't have much communication and so on. Like, you get what I'm saying?
Well, you know what I say to that, baby? Um, give yourself permission to figure things out. You're intelligent enough and reflect enough on all of these things. I I see in you everything that you have learned from this. You have grown from this, and I trust that from every situation you have taken enough pebbles out of this that when that time comes, you will have found the right partner, and you'll know if that's that person that you want to create that family with. There's nothing wrong with doing your interview, because what I'll say that I did not do in sitting down with your father was completing that entire interview. Because had I taken the time to do the entire background interview and checking everything, I would not have started a family with him. I would have gone on to a different plan. But I did not take that time to do everything necessary to find out everything that I needed to know. At the time that everything was going on with him, he seemed like a good guy and everything was going fine. And I won't take from him the fact that deep down inside, there's still a good guy somewhere in him. Things just happen somewhere along the way, and situation and circumstances just didn't pan out for us. I'm sure somewhere it may work out in itself where he can better himself, because he's been working on that. It's just not going to be better for me, because I'm not going back there to figure it out. As much as he's asking and would like the opportunity for us to try it again, that's not what I'm looking for. And I would say for you, take your time, do your homework, interview, ask questions, get to know.
But what
find out everything you need to know in the backstory before you move forward. Because as much information as you can get in a backstory will help you to plan going forward. And that's what I didn't do. I failed in getting the complete backstory. I started getting more in the backstory moving forward after you were here. That's when I started getting more of the backstory, but you were already here at that time. And so by the time I started getting more of the backstory, I had you. And then your brother was en route. So I felt like it's too late. I'm here. I'm stuck. So whatever. Just keep going and see where this takes me.
You don't think there's slightly more of a pressure on me specifically as a queer person with, like, because there's always that question of whether or not I'll end up having a biological child, and like depending on my partnership, because of my pansexuality, I could end up with a heterosexual partner, or I could end up with a homosexual partner, and somewhere in between. Um, do you feel like that? What's the word I'm looking for? Or that, like, the weight of queerness almost makes the pressure of future parenthood a bit, like, more. Ooh, what's the word? Like, there's more pressure on me to be such a good parent because it's specifically a decision, or it's more work almost.
Parenting doesn't come with the book. There's no right or wrong way to parent. You are no better or worse as a parent, whether you are heterosexual, homosexual, pansexual, queer, none of those things. You can be A to Z, and it doesn't make you better or worse as a parent. There are 1,299,000 books in parenting, and unfortunately, none of them are going to teach you anything other than what somebody else is saying. And most of those books are written by people who have degrees but no children. Experience is always going to be your teacher. When you become a parent, your child is going to be what teaches you how to be the parent, because you're going to learn your child as your child learns you. And that is where you're going to get your parenting experience from.
Okay. That actually makes a lot of sense. I guess that's an appropriate step for us to move to the next segment, our picking petals, which is a Q&A. So our first question is, it comes from the side of dysfunctional fatherhood. Um, do you feel as though you had to seek out other father figures or different things in men growing up because of your dysfunction with your father?
You said what? Do I feel?
Did you feel as though you had to find other father figures or seek out different things in men growing up because of your relationship with your father?
No, I did have father figures, but I didn't feel like I looked for anything specific in men, because um, I was the only girl in the house full of boys, and I was validated all the time. Um, my brothers took well care of me. Oh my goodness. Um, they were very protective, and they made sure that um, boys didn't get close to me for any reason whatsoever. I was not promiscuous. Dating was not an issue. Boys didn't hang out around me other than their friends, and their friends were not allowed to date me. So um, when I did start dating, I was kind of considered like the old maid, because I started dating late in life, thanks to my brothers.
What was my excuse? Just came at my neck. Uh, I guess I have to answer the question too. For me, I want to say it was a little bit different. Both because, as I explained prior, there was that whole segment of my life where I didn't even know this man was my father, and so that whole strain affected, even to this day, that relationship, because it's still. I know he's my father now, but there's that disconnect because there's not just that unquestionable. It was one of those, it's something you learn later on. It's like, oh, this is my father. It wasn't a, yeah, this is my dad. And so, on top of that whole disconnect happening, there was also that level of unhealthy and almost absent relationship between he and I, aside from the financial providing. So I sought out different emotional or quality wise different things that I thought made up a great father according to TV and movies and whatever I had seen and or read, because I read a lot of books growing up. Um, and I sought that out in so many different people within church, within school, even amongst my friend groups too. I find that a lot of the male friends that I had growing up were different people who were maybe more mature than I, or offered a sense of physical strength, because a few of my friends, when I was not necessarily shy but more in my reserved or more patient and kind-hearted and naive phase, were people who ended up having to advocate and fight my battles for me, because I was so, again, kind and naive and not necessarily fending for myself. Um, and it later on got to a point where, as I got older and even started questioning my identity, and then after I found out my identity, because I had to do a lot of that searching on my own and couldn't even seek out my father's side of it. And then while I could have come to you about anything, I didn't necessarily come to you about it, because realistically, my first question was, and this was in my biological state, how is my mom going to help me be a man? This was before I even found out about my gender non-conforming identity. Uh, how is my mom going to help me be a man, and how am I going to confront being a man with this gayness on me and dealing with my sexuality at that point? And then we were also staying with my uncle at the time, who wasn't necessarily toxic. However, he was in more of a bachelor mindset. So he hadn't come to that parental or fatherly energy that I necessarily needed. Whew, this is a heavy conversation. um, was there anything else you wanted to say before we went to the next question?
Um, no, there's just nah.
Okay. The next question. What is a common misconception you feel people have of black fathers?
They're no good. They're all dogs. They make them, but they don't take care of them. They're never there. They're not dependable. Um, yeah, anything that you think of in the negative aspect, um, it does not apply to everyone, because one does not identify all, and you can't put that jacket on all men, because all men are not alike. You can't take one specific man and have him be the
The monolithic figure and
for
Superman.
for the entire race, ethnicity, culture. He doesn't define all of them, because you've been hurt by one. He doesn't say that is every one of them. However, one man can actually hurt one woman, and she never wants to deal with another man, because now all men are dogs, or every black man is a dog.
That makes
And
sense.
and that doesn't hold true, because there are some good quality black men, and they're out there. I used to hear people say, all the good men are either dead or waiting to be born. And for a while, I kind of bought into that. And then I said, well, no, that can't be true. Because if that were true, there wouldn't be black women on the arms of black men and marriages that have been going on for so many number of years. Because, again, prime example is my man Uncle QC. Because from the time they married until his death, because he passed before she did, they were married 48 years.
He was an amazing man, and she always sang of his praises.
Exactly.
And more than that, we could tell, like, there was always a healthy relationship between the two, even when there was complication. And
Right.
it was almost like this man worshiped the ground that she walked on. And I'm not saying that is what made him a good man, but it was that healthy level of actual affection, I think that.
Exactly.
Because that leads to more my answer of this question. There's always this misunderstanding that there's no love from a black man, or that black men don't care, be it about their spouses or their children. And I want to attribute that partially to, because it's not entirely wrong. I just feel like it's not representational of all fathers, because there's some fathers who are capable of showing love and affection and providing healthy relationships with their children. But even for those who don't, it's not to say that they don't care. It's maybe that they didn't learn how to love the right way, because there's a whole, like, especially considering from a racial, and I'm going to get a bit educational right now, from a racial standpoint, growing up, men had to be strong and had to be given all these tools on how to navigate the world for survival. And so, since we've all been sort of living in survival mode, they weren't worried about nurturing. They're worried about protecting and providing. And aside from protection
Well, and then too, it's also the stigma that men are supposed to cry.
right, the
And,
toxic masculinity.
because a man has been always even from their toddler life. A little girl cries, everybody picks her up, they coddle her, they hug her, they hold her, they make her feel, oh my God, she's so
Fragile.
she's fragile. She's that crystal. You want to make sure that she's okay.
Protect her gem.
Falls, your boy falls, and everybody picks him up, dusts him off. You okay? You be alright.
Rub a little dirt in it. You alright.
Wipe them tears. Don't cry.
You're supposed to.
You be alright. Let's go.
Because, right, as I was saying earlier, is that toxic masculinity, and then again tying that race portion into it. We as black people are seen as these strong figures because we've been almost animalized and put in this beastly form.
Blacks, because I've seen that done in Latino culture too.
Well, right. I mean, okay, I'll go minority culture then.
Yes, where they tell the boys don't cry, they dust them off. You're okay, suck it up. Just get back out there, go at it again, and it irritates me because who told you it didn't hurt?
But there's this misconception that we as people of color, and especially, again, black people, have this higher threshold for pain and strength and tolerance, and so we're able to withstand, and we're more durable and can tolerate more.
But are you weak because you cry? Because the thing is, pain is pain. I don't care where it comes from. If you feeling pain, you feeling pain. If you get hit with a bat, does it not hurt you just like it would hurt me? If you experience the loss of a family member, is it still a loss just the same? And the thing is, are you not supposed to cry because of this loss? And are you not supposed to cry because you got hit with that bat? It's still pain. And why is it that we treat that pain like it's so much different for a man than it is for a woman? And how come she gets to cry, but he doesn't? The society says women can hug, but men, you better shake hands. Don't you hug that man. It's a problem. And you teach that, but it's wrong. And then you also say, okay, well, girls, it's okay for the little girl to get down on her knees and roll a car around, but when your son plays with a doll, it's a problem. But what happened to the point of that little boy saw his dad holding his baby brother or his baby sister, and all he's doing is mimicking what he saw at home. And so he is actively practicing the behaviors of being a good dad, not that he's practicing feminine behaviors. He's mimicking what he saw at home. And so why is it that he has to be doing something like a girl as opposed to mimicking his dad, and he's going to be an awesome father one day because he's so nurturing to this doll? But society says if he holds this doll, he's going to be
A pansy.
and we leave it at that. But it's okay for your daughter to get on her hands and knees and play with a truck, but she's not going to be, and I'll leave it there.
She's not gonna be
And
manly.
and there and it's back and forth. And they see different things going on like this, and everybody has their mouth on what's going on with this, but nobody sees the bigger picture in what's going on with that. And until somebody actually says, step outside this box and think about your home life. Does this say that this is what you see, or does this say this is what this child sees? And can we just say this is mimic behaviors and it's okay for this to take place because this is what is seen and it's okay? And if a man cries, I don't say it shows that he's sensitive and weak. I say it shows his strength and his character because he's strong enough to show that he's hurting.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Our last question is a bit more lighthearted than all the prior conversations. Who do you feel were some prominent or positive male figures and role models in media or in the world when you were growing up?
When I was coming up,
Remember, these people don't know your age, mama.
okay, then I'm not going to talk.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, actually, the uh, you know, I may offend people, but uh, the the men that I actually uh, watched in the media growing up, and I really didn't. I mean, I've never been big on TV, but for the TV shows that um, I watched George Jefferson. I looked at James Evans, and these are the characters. Um, then moving forward was Bill Cosby, um, which was what Dr. Huxtable.
Yeah.
Then there was Philip Banks, um, and these are just a few of those names that to mind. Um, who else is out there? I'm trying to think. Those are like the main shows that I really kind of watched the most because I really didn't get into a lot of shows. Um, but yeah, those are like the main shows that I really watched like a lot of. If I did watch, um, I kind of got away from TV because I really didn't do a lot of TV. But uh, those are like the main ones that really watch the most because he did more like family shows. If I did do a lot of anything.
Okay. For me, I think I'd
I'm
have.
sure. I'm sure there's more, but I can't think of them right now. They'll
That's
probably come to me.
that's valid. Um, the first things I can think of growing up, I know there was in syndication we had Moesha, so there's definitely Moesha's dad that I got to look at, and it was very much like very interesting to see that single father, and
Yeah,
then
I told you they'll come to me. Go ahead.
there was Moesha's dad, Michael Kyle from My Wife and Kids, that was Damon Wayans. We all had lovely Dr. Huxtable, but I mean, I saw the Cosby Show because again, it was always on UPN or something, and then
Right.
I also got A Different World, and it was always interesting still seeing that dynamic while she was away at college.
Right.
Let's see, who else was there? I feel like there was a lot of like, because I was Disney kid, there was the animal or cartoon father. So there's like, first things that come to mind for me was Mulan's dad, and like I guess I should explain why that one specifically came to mind. Was like, I guess Mulan's not a black dad though, so I have to take that back. Mufasa was black. You can't convince me otherwise. Mufasa was black. I mean, not just because he was voiced by James Earl Jones, but like Mufasa was black. The whole Lion King was black. Okay, there's a reason why even in the remake they casted black people. It's because that's a black movie. You can't convince me otherwise. And if you try to, you're wrong. You're blocked. Go away. uh, let's see. I don't know why it's so hard. I feel like after a lot of the 90s shows, and I didn't get back into a lot of 90s shows and whatnot until I got older, um, we didn't really get to see many black dads. I mean, I had my whole spat where, and don't, I mean, I guess I'm grown now, so you can't kill me for it because I got away with it. My watching Vampire Diaries, I got to see Bonnie's dad, where he wasn't the best in the world, especially considering we didn't really know. We heard about him, but we didn't know about him till like 4 or 5 seasons in. But as much as he wasn't the perfect father, everything he did, and we knew what he was doing, was for the best interest of putting Bonnie first because every time, and this was a supernatural series, so I feel like that plays into it. Every time something was going on, Bonnie was always in the center of it as the witch, and she was the one putting all of her life and all of her wants and needs aside for the sacrifice of others. And he was just the only one that was in her corner looking out for her. Again, I feel like there's also that it played an interesting part seeing that he pretty much raised her as an only child, and so the only maternal figure she had growing up was her grams. So I think that played a whole like all these different. I don't know why it's so. Where did all the black men go from my generation? Would be my question. Or not black men, but where'd all the black men in media go for like parenthood and fathering for my generation go? They disappeared.
No, I don't think they disappeared. I just kind of think in the media world, um, it just holds true to what Hollywood has actively been doing all the time. It just is showing itself.
Oh, I just thought of two more. One's a cartoon, and the other one is actually no, never mind. Scratch the other one. But Barnyard. Otis's dad was black.
Right.
It gave me very like even going back and trying to analyze it now. I feel like Otis was a mixed child, and his dad was very much that black male figure that was there cultivating and inspiring, and he was stern but active and inspired him to become a man.
Right.
No. Plus, also Barnyard is. I feel like I just wanted to plug that movie too because that movie's amazing. This is why
I
we.
like Barnyard.
I'm gonna make Tank watch it when we go back because that was his movie growing up.
Yes, it was.
Especially when it got to that part with the weird furry thing.
Oh yeah, I got the sweet legs.
See, okay, there's another good circling back. There was another good moment, and not necessarily for me, but I guess witnessing it sort of worked for me too. But um, there was a that was a really positive moment between my father and my brother. I think I might have a little bit of envy, honestly, for and I can acknowledge that because it was the baby boy and the baby girl having my brother and sister, and I was the eldest of that second batch of kids. That well, I say second batch. You, all of us came from you, but he had two separate splits of kids.
Right.
I'm clarifying that for them, not that you didn't know that. But I felt like there was maybe a bit of envy, possibly because, well, not possibly, because I know for sure there was that whole, like, I got to know him very briefly before Tank came. It was like almost, I want to say it was maybe 2 or 3 years of me actively getting to know this man, and then my brother was here, and as I got to know this man, I had to sort of watch him be a hands-on father and actively work with Tank, and he had to show up with Tank because as much he couldn't just be around at that point because Tank had those medical issues, so he had to be cared for. And then on top of that, and just after having him forcibly put into care provider and also this is baby boy mode, um, that relationship just a lot. There was a lot more positive aspects that came forth from it, and I'm not gonna say that that makes a perfect relationship between them because I can't speak to the relationship, but I don't even think there's much positivity there now. But
No, it's a struggle.
but I think just having seen all that, he would like I guess trying to get him to be the father figure that I saw him being to my brother was sort of an issue too. Because as we were talking about the Sweet Legs, the first thing I could remember was them watching the movie together, and it's just him and Tank, and he's bouncing Tank, and Tank's having the time of his life, just jumping around and bouncing and living his best life, as Kai would say. And
Right.
I'm sitting there and I'm laughing along with it, both because it's cute, but like also because I'm realizing like that's what I want from him. That's kind of
Right.
cool, and recognizing I'm like I don't have that,
Right.
and it wasn't really in that envy sort of turned into me neglecting Tank, but that's a different topic for another day. Uh, we'll move right to the next segment because we took a bit of a distraction there. Turning a new leaf. Do you have any advice or recommendations for or no, not advice recommendations, but like um do you feel like there's anything to like share for black fathers now or people who may become black fathers in the future?
it's work, and again, as I stated earlier, um, there's no manual. It is an experience. You learn as you go. Um, you are learning your child is learning you. Do your homework first before you begin to procreate, because your children don't pick you. You choose your partner, and then you make your children. So it is actively wise when you're going into parenting to establish this relationship and get to know your mate before you start into the world of parenting. Because once you get into that, trust and believe that you are stuck for the rest of the children's lives with each other. Because regardless of whatever's going on, you two have to come to some form of an agreement on what is going on with these children. Unless somebody signs off on parental rights, you two are always going to have to work together in some kind of way. So I would say to fathers, you are important. It takes you to help with modeling and developing, educating, and getting these children where they need to go. You are very much important. I do speak from a forum of knowing that dad is very much important. He is a teacher in a way that mom is not. His nurturing role is a lot different from that of mom. And for everything that he brings to the table, it is very much important to what that child is going to grow and develop and become in their adult life. So when dad is absent from the home, his presence in that child's life, even if he's not in the home every day, his presence in the child's life is still imperative. So dad has to be a part of that child's life with regularity, because he plays such an imperative role. So for every dad out there listening to this, know that you have an important role to play in your child's life from the moment that they enter this world prenatally until they become an adult. You matter.
I think I actually really love that. Um, I would think my advice to black fathers would be ah, one, be honest, because we're not stupid. And I don't say that trying to attack you. I want to say that just being completely transparent. You like you're as much as you may think you're trying to hide things from us, we eventually are going to notice, and those discrepancies and all the secrecy build a level of distrust, and you are the first man that we trust. And if we can't trust you, then we later on either seek men that we can trust, which puts us in this weird space where we're spiraling because we're almost at crazy, like this crazy psychopath level, looking for any minor discrepancy in every single man, or we just don't trust anybody, and that makes us cold and distant and doesn't allow us to explore our emotions and affection and a range of feelings the best way we probably could. And aside from the honesty, I think it's just, mm, how do I want to say this? Remember that we will continue to love you regardless. Like, we will never stop loving you. However, alternately, remember that love and hate are two sides of the same coin. And if you push us to one side, we will teeter over. So we tend like the it's a trick coin almost. There's more weight on the side of love, but there is that chance that we could teeter to hate. So try and just always cultivate and try and remember that love hangs in the balance. And it comes with not necessarily you being, again, you can't be perfect. No one is. No one's a perfect person. You can't be a perfect parent. Life doesn't come with a manual, and neither does parenthood. But doing your best should also at least come with a level of communication, because we have to live with you in this as well. Like my mom was saying, we're getting to know you and you're getting to know us. It's a two-way street. I did this a bit out of order. So this last segment is going to be plugging new roots. You and I are going to go back and forth and select 5 songs, or if you have any honorable mentions after the 5, you can plug some in pertaining to like black fatherhood, or things that you wish you had, like songs that make you think of your father, or all those different things. Do you want to go first or should I?
The first song that's always gonna make me think of my father is Staple Singers.
I'll take you
Uh,
there.
that's always gonna bring
That,
me back to my dad.
that's Papa's song. Uh, in the same light, my father is a huge Patti LaBelle fan. So I guess if I had to pick one song, I'm gonna pick the very first Patti. Like, I knew several Patti LaBelle songs growing up, but I think, and it came from a moment because I didn't even know he had a cassette player. The first Patti LaBelle song I really fell in love with was "Feels Like Another One." It's so random, I know, but it was, again, it was a small moment that was positive between he and and I have to hold on to those little glimmers to remember his humanity almost.
And he's also Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh, I know, I know. Remember San Juan Capistrano?
Yes.
He had so many CDs. God. Bootsy Collins, Earth, Wind and Fire, Parliament. Who else was on them CDs? Al Green, Ron Isley. Uh, I want to say he had Donnell Jones too. Was it Donnell? No, I don't think it was Donnell Jones. I know he had Donny Hathaway. But that's a digression. For what's another song for you?
Um, wow. I don't know who the artist is, but and I can't even think of the name of the song, but my mom used to play it because I used to play the song all the time when my dad would go to work, and she said it was my favorite song because I would walk around with um, a little portable radio, and I would play the song all the time because some of the lyrics in the song was, "I've been lonely for so long, don't seem like happiness will come along," and I have no idea who sings that song. I guess I'll have to look it up.
I'll probably
So
find it.
so I can find that song. But I've heard the song several times, but I can't tell you right now who sings that song.
I wouldn't sweat too much. I am gonna put together a playlist to go with today's episode. I'd like to also take a minute to address everyone who looks for these playlists. The playlists can be found in the description box below this, as well as all the social media to find the guests if they have it or if they decide to share that. You can anything pertaining to the show that was not directly mentioned here will always be found in the description box below. Song number 2 from me. Uh, it's gonna be "I Hope You Dance." I don't know exactly who sings the song, but I know the song in my mind if I think of it. And so I'm gonna plug that one in. It's more so about all the different things that, and it's almost inappropriate because I feel like it's misplaced because this is someone talking about a lover, but it's more so just about wanting all these good things to happen for someone else. Um, do you have a third song or do you need a moment?
No, my third song is the Jackson 5, Enjoy Yourself.
Okay. Uh,
Because that was our dance song.
my third song. Oh, I feel like he was a black dad too, but no one wants to talk about it, especially considering uh, everything. Like, I'm not gonna even try and explain it. I'm just gonna stand on the fact that I think Goofy was a black dad, a quirky black dad at that, which made me love it even more. And you know exactly what song I'm about to bring up. Um, what actually? Uh, I decided to change my mind. It's I'm gonna do. Well, not change my mind. I'm gonna still do a song from that soundtrack because God knows I know front and back the Goofy movie soundtrack, but I was initially gonna do Eye to Eye, but instead I'm thinking we could do On the Open Road because that was like it was really it was cringy for Max, but there was at least that weird fatherly bonding, and it was hilarious watching that whole dynamic in the film where he kept like extending this olive branch, and like as much as he didn't like it, Max knew that like his dad was there, and it got on his nerves, but it was still that present relationship.
Right.
That's the song I'm gonna go with for that one. But I might still plug Eye to Eye because Tevin Campbell ate up this entire soundtrack. He ate up that movie. um, Number 4.
Um, I'm trying to think. Uh, can't think of the song right now. Just slipped my mind that fast.
Give me some lyrics. Maybe I can help. Well, while you think, I'll give my song number 4. Um, my song number 4 is gonna be I can't think of the name of the song. I feel like you would know best, but it's Stevie Wonder. I wish those days would come back once more.
I wish. That's the
song.
Oh,
yeah. I wish. Has your song come to you yet?
It's oh God. It is oh my God.
Ma'am, you're really over there struggling, aren't
Let's
you?
do it again. That was the song.
Let's do it again. Smokey Robinson?
No. The Staples.
Oh, I don't know why I thought Smokey Robinson, but I know what song you're talking about because I'm playing it in my head.
Yeah, the Staples.
Seeing your sweet face, no anymore. Let's do it again. Do it again.
Yeah.
Oh, I know why I was thinking Smokey Robinson because Cruisin' has the same tone and key.
The bass, almost the same bass line.
Mm-hmm. And I think my song number 5, because I'm gonna take the lead on this one. Pure Imagination, mostly because it's where I spent a lot of my space with my father, where either I needed to escape him or I spent so much time in my own head trying to idealize him so that I had this better version of him or romanticized idea of him. So I spent so much time in my head building this concept of my father to replace who he really was, or taking traits of who he was in a positive light and putting it in this fluffy brain dad. For you?
Wow.
What? It's true. You know, half the time when I was talking to him, I would space off because it got to a point where you even had to tell him, you know, he's not listening, right?
Right. I did. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What? Okay.
I'm gonna start telling people how they 5 songs ready when they show up.
Otis Redding, sir.
Ooh.
Otis Redding.
Otis Redding. Which song?
Yes. Otis Redding.
You better not do it, donkey.
What?
Nothing.
No, it wasn't Try a Little Tenderness.
I promise you I was about to hang up this phone.
No, it wasn't Try a Little Tenderness. Actually, the song was, I think of him with, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, because it just kind of, right.
I could see that for Papa. It's kind of his. I feel like those would be the kind of song he listened to while he was doing his odd jobs.
Yeah, just him, just being that, just because he kind of has his, he's kind of nonchalant and
Hakuna Matata,
like,
yeah.
Laid back, lots of days ago kind of guy.
Mhm. I could definitely say that. That was the vibes I got from him growing up. It wasn't real. Like all of my relationship with him wasn't really. I guess but that's more normal in a grandparent. It was always very chill, very laid back. It was like, okay, that's what you're doing in school. That's what you're doing in school. All right.
Right.
And it like anytime, even when I was in trouble too, like he would get on my head if I did something, but it was always more of a, we're not gonna talk about that right now though. That's a you and your mom issue. Right now we talking. But this was nice. We had a long. We've been talking for almost 2 hours.
Yes, and jealous, but it's going crazy.
Which one, the dog or the boy?
Kevin,
Oh, he'll be alright.
no, he's having a connection that I have got from, let me see here. He started at, uh,
We started like once. We started at like one. Well,
no, 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 no. He
oh, you mean the
started,
entire time since we've started?
right,
Cause I've been talking to you on and off since like 11.
no, no, no. He started sending me messages at 12:26.
I'm is gonna warn you to watch what you say though, cause I do not edit these. So what you say is what you say, and this will be going.
Good.
I just want to make sure.
Okay. No, no, no. He's been sending messages since 12:26. He's sent me about one, two, three, four, five,
Well, it's
six,
3 now, so he probably
seven,
real mad. Blame it
eight,
on me.
10 songs that I need to listen to, and he says he's in his mood.
Uh, weenie head. Now he sees how I felt the other night when I was trying to talk to you.
But now I have to listen to all of these songs so I can see what kind of mood he's in.
Ha ha, you got
Because
homework.
his jealous side is kicked in.
Well, let me wrap this up. Thank you to everyone for coming out as always. As I was saying before, you can find everything to do with today's episode in the description box below. Um, Mama Rose, do you want to plug anything right now? Any links, any movements, projects, social media, anything?
Not at all.
That's fine. Okay. Um, Also, I feel like I should clarify when I say description box, this is only available to the YouTube viewers and the people who are watching this or listening to this, or not watching this, excuse me, listening to this on my website or specific through Anchor. That's going to be anchor.fm/La Rosa Negra with a Z. You can find all of the description links under click here's on every single podcast. And also, feel free to send me a message and let me know if you'd be interested in seeing the video versions of these, because I'm thinking about starting a Patreon, and it would be a low monthly fee, maybe about $5, like a pizza, or not even a pizza, just a simple, like, yeah, that's, you could do without a sandwich on one day, or not even one sandwich. $5 for 1 month for all the crazy content that I would be giving in these different podcast videos, because there's so much that happens behind the scenes here. You're only hearing it. You're missing all the different goofiness that happens with the guest's face and so much more. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, shoot me a message, leave it in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you, Petals, for stopping in. Bye, y'all.